Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Chase with Jace. I'm your host, as always, Jace LeJeune, and we're about to talk about what was a very disappointing, very uninspired, underwhelming, whatever word you want to put to it, loss to Florida State to start the year. I'm sure all of us were pretty disappointed. A lot of high expectations going to this LSU football team, and what was expected. Obviously, a lot of high expectations going into the game. LSU coming off a year with Brian Kelly when they won 10 games, won the SEC West. A lot of very positives in year number one. A lot of returning players come back for this upcoming season. And LSU is sliding at number 5 in the polls, and you're thinking, okay, LSU, it's time for them to take the next step and see what they can do with it. Unfortunately, they came and ran to a buzzsaw, which was Florida State, and we all knew, and we talked about it with Florida State and what kind of team that they had and what they had to really bring to the table. But I don't think anybody really expected to see what we saw on Sunday night. First half, we'll go and talk about it a little bit more. We'll kind of break down the game as we go on later in the day. First half, even though LSU went to halftime with the lead, 17-14, you go back and look at it, it's to have the lead. You wouldn't think LSU had the lead in that game. But that first half, LSU, you can say, outplayed Florida State in a lot of areas and really left some opportunities off the table in that first half. Obviously, with the 2 fourth down stops in the first half, you get some of those fall your way. Man, you're maybe looking at like a 17-point lead going to halftime at best case scenario. So when LSU got the 17-14 lead to go into halftime, it felt disappointing, and you can just tell it carried over into the second half, where Florida State pretty much dominated, outscoring LSU 31-0 in the second half. So we'll see how LSU bounces back from it, and we'll talk about that as well on how they can respond to it, and a little bit of deja vu from last year. Obviously a lot worse than last year's situation, with LSU losing by a pretty good margin this time around when it was a really close game last year, to start the season off. So Brian Kelly got a chance to talk to the media on Tuesday, because Labor Day weekend, right? So what usually was the Monday press conference was really the Tuesday press conference. So Brian Kelly got a chance to talk to the media about his thoughts on the LSU game. So we're going to play a couple quick clips for you. And first of all, what he talks about first in this first clip that you're about to hear about here, Brian Kelly talks about, so he just talks about how the team had to deal with a lot of different stuff. And the first thing he addressed was he had a comment in the post game about the team, that this wasn't the type of team that he really expected coming out. And it really threw a lot of people for a loop when he said those comments at the end of the game, that this was not the team that he expected coming out. So Brian Kelly actually had a chance to elaborate on those comments that he said after post game, after his initial reaction, saying that this wasn't the team he thought he'd seen from practice. So this is Brian Kelly kind of talking more about that and what he really meant by those comments.
For the first time, and I think my comments, I want to kind of elaborate. I said this is not the team I thought it was. It has nothing to do with their physical ability. I knew who they were physically, but when you're playing and competing at the highest level, this is about a connection between the mental and the mental preparation, the mind and the body, and there was a disconnect there. The disconnect was, it's a hard game. The game of football requires a competitive edge that we lacked, in particular the second half. As you know, we got outscored 31-7. So understanding and recognizing, how our team was thinking and what they thought about themselves and their beliefs And all of those things come into question when you talk about the performance. Because it's not just about talent. It's the ability to put talent and certainly the right way of thinking and what they believe, and certainly that belief was misguided, and that falls on my shoulders.
Yeah, that was Brian Kelly there. I mean, he elaborated on a lot of different things on that comment, because I know a lot of people were really drawing attention to it about this wasn't the type of team that he expected. But really what Brian Kelly really meant, this wasn't the type of performance he really saw from his team in terms of, because physically we know what kind of team LSU has. I mean, physically, athletically, LSU has a bunch of talent, a bunch of returning players, but just the mentality, he talked about it, the mentality was just not there of what he's seen. The execution wasn't there from what he's seen. And in terms of the actual game, he was right. I mean, it wasn't the type of team that he expected. He expected a more veteran team, and they just didn't play like veterans. They were really tensed up in a lot of situations, and this did not look like the team that a lot of us, the media, saw throughout fall. It was just as simple as that. And for Brian Kelly, I mean, it's just a really look in the mirror to see how this team really bounces back and what they can do from this moving forward. Brian Kelly, he also talked to the media. There was also another thing he did talk about, and it was about the team having a competitive edge. I mean, if you go back, look at the first half of that game, what really happened was the first half, Florida State brought the energy. And you can go back and look at the penalties. Like early in the first half, Florida State had a bunch of penalties in that first half. But you look at those penalties, those are all effort-type penalties, intensity-type penalties with the unsportsmanlike conducts and really after the play stuff. But those are just really things that can get you inside the mindset of LSU. And Florida State really got into the mind of LSU and really got in their heads all game. It really helped them in the second half. Florida State was the more aggressive team. They were the more intense team. They really brought that energy throughout the rest of the game. And if you would just saw this game, you thought Florida State was the team that lost to LSU last year, not the other way around, because it seemed like they wanted more. They were intense. They were motivated. They were energized. Any word that you can describe it, that's what Florida State really was. I mean, they really brought it to LSU. And Brian Kelly, he talked about it after the game. If you go back and listen to his comments in the post game, he did not like how LSU was emotionally as far as a competitive edge. It didn't bring that competitive edge that Florida State brought in the second half. And you mentioned the penalties. I mean, if that's one positive LSU had throughout the game, they didn't have many penalties in the football game. But Brian Kelly mentioned that there's like a balance between not being too aggressive, right, with some boneheaded penalties and stuff like that. But at the same time, you don't want to be too soft either. And I felt like that LSU was on the in the spectrum when it comes to the soft side. So Brian Kelly talked about bringing that competitive edge and what needs to be done in order to bring that competitive edge back to LSU.
Some guys played with it and others didn't, but it's not good enough if we don't all have that same competitive edge. And as I mentioned, it's playing with a sense of urgency. It's when your offense comes out from the sideline and jogs out, to start the next possession, and the clock's running down and there's 6-7 seconds. That's not a sense of urgency. It's on defense when the backside corner's jogging across the field in run support instead of sprinting across the field like his life depended upon it. So it's coaching that. It's showing that on film. It's doubling down on the importance of playing with a sense of urgency. And having the emotional control so it doesn't spill out into 10 penalties like Florida State had. We had 2 penalties in the game. So we probably had too much emotional control. So it's the balancing act of those two things, and knowing that we're early in the season and just have to make sure that we're accentuation on the most important facts, and that is one of the important facts.
Yeah, it was Brian Kelly just giving his thoughts on just bringing that competitive edge. That's a big thing when it comes to football, just any level of football. The more intense team, the more energized team, the more physical team. Probably about 99, mostly 100 times out of 100, that team is going to end up being on top. And that's what Florida State was. They really brought it throughout the entire game. And LSU just didn't have that. You can tell. I mean, they just didn't have any boost, or not one time throughout the game you felt like LSU was motivated and energized and felt like that, man, like this is our game, we're going to take over. It just wasn't there. And you can tell with some of the things that happened throughout the game. So LSU, if you watch LSU and watch LSU as far as winning football, what made LSU so good, especially like winning when they were winning with less, and early that 2019 team with Coach Orgeron, was that they had the swag, right? They had an energy about them, and this team, you just didn't really see that really transpire on the field. And it's one thing to kind of look to coaches as far as like leadership in terms of scheme, but when it comes to like being that guy on the field, there's only so much coaches can do, right? So the players have to bring that energy, they have to bring that edge, and LSU just didn't bring that. So I'm intrigued to see which guys can do that, which guys can bring that energy, they can bring that edge to the football field. See what guys bring that on the football field. What leaders emerge out of this? Who really gets the most out of that from their team? So I'm intrigued to see what players do that. Cameron asked a question too. We're going to address all questions as well. So I appreciate Cameron coming in and asking a question. If you have any questions as well, make sure to put them in the chat. There's going to be an opportunity for me to answer all the questions that you have about the LSU game. Could be about the Grambling game coming up. Could be about the Florida State loss and what transpired as well. So to answer Cameron's question about what surprised me the most about the game and how he lost, it has to be up front physically. I thought that I was really surprised how much Florida State's defensive line, in my opinion, pushed around LSU, especially on the right side. And we all know about the left side. We all know about Will Campbell, Garrett Dellinger. You pretty much thought that was going to be a strength for the offensive line. It is. Only one time, Jared Verse got in the backfield and sacked Jaden Daniels. But besides that, I felt like the left side held their own. But really, the offensive line, and they just couldn't run the football with the running backs. The interior of the defensive line really pushed LSU around. And I found that to be really surprising about that game. I felt like in the second half and the fourth quarter, how LSU wore down on both sides of the football, that really surprised me. You can talk about the receivers. We'll go and talk about the receivers and how Florida State did. But them going off against the defensive backs, that didn't really surprise me. I knew that was going to be an issue. I knew that was going to be something that LSU had to overcome. But being out physical, I guess that's the way to say, just really bullied, really surprised me about that game and how it looked. And then offensively, I really thought LSU was going to put more points than that. I really did. Just because you saw it. Like last year, how that offense, really in the second half of the season, really took off. And that reminded me a lot of what Burrow and the offense did in 18, right? The first half of the season was not pretty offensively, but around middle of the season, around that Ole Miss game in 2018, that offense really came around. This is the same thing. I thought LSU's offense was going to be really a really fine-tuned little machine. And really, the first two plays, it started off looking like that, right? I mean, Jaden Daniels hits a big pass out of the backfield to Trey Bradford on the first play. You get another 15-yard run, catch and run by Mason Taylor, and 2 plays, boom, you're inside the 5-yard line. You're like, okay, this is exactly what we pictured the LSU offense to look like. But them getting stuffed again on 4th down, had about 6 plays punching in, just could not finish that drive. Really, that surprised me. I thought LSU was going to put some more points up, especially in the second half, and keep up with Florida State offensively with that quarterback battle that everybody was looking forward to, seeing Jaden Daniels and Jordan Travis. But really, LSU just couldn't do it. They couldn't be in the shootout, which really shocked me. So just being out physical, and then really the offense not being able to finish drives, that really surprised me. Those are my 2 biggest takeaways, I have to say, from the game. So appreciate that question, Cameron. Hope that answers your question. If you have any other questions, feel free to get involved. If you have any questions for the Chase with Jay show, Marcus can't be with me here today. I'm sure Marcus will join me next week. But we'll keep on moving forward with another quote from Brian Kelly. There's a couple of them we're going to address here. The next one is about Harold Perkins, and that was another big thing about the game. If LSU's defense was going to be or make an impact in this game without Mason Smith in the lineup, it would have had to have been Harold Perkins making a difference off the edge. And we all knew about what LSU was trying to do with Harold Perkins and trying to make him more of a complete 3-down linebacker, more of an inside linebacker. But the first original look at the experiment, well, it didn't look that great with Harold Perkins not really having an impact in the game and moving him to the inside, taking away from the outside. The thing about that's what Florida State wanted. They want Harold Perkins to be game plan out the game, and LSU basically did that. We'll put him in the inside, so he was pretty much a non-factor in getting to Travis. No quarterback hurries, no sacks. So it's going to be interesting to see what LSU does and see if they try to keep on molding Harold Perkins and becoming an inside linebacker, or they're going to say, hey, last year you were dominant, just saying, see ball, go get ball. Do you do that again with him? Yeah, it's going to be a good balancing act to see what LSU does right there. This is what Brian Kelly had to say about Harold Perkins and his usage on Sunday.
Certainly a question that we have talked about. There's a lot going on, and you could clearly look at Harold and what he's asked to do versus, lining him up off the edge. Player development has to be thought about. Where he goes at the next level has to be thought about, and then impacting our team. So I think that there's a happy medium there that we could probably strike, and we've already begun to look at how we can be most effective for Harold and for LSU.
Yeah, so it's a lot of different factors Brian Kelly said about it with bringing a guy, a 5-star talent like Harold Perkins. If you watch the game, Kirk Herbstreit, Chris Fowler addressed it, that Harold Perkins is an edge guy, and hasn't played a lot of linebacker coming out of high school. He was a running back and he was a defensive end in high school. So that's pretty much what he played in high school. He's still really trying to get to learn the nuances about the position, about playing a linebacker. You can tell that he didn't feel comfortable at linebacker, dropping back in coverage and doing multiple different things in coverage. You can tell that's not what he was really comfortable with. So we'll see if it's like, hey, you're most effective as a pass rusher and getting to the quarterback and being an athlete where you don't have to think. And that's the biggest thing for athletes. When you have to go out there, for any athlete, you go out there and have to think the entire time and not just naturally react and just being an athlete, it makes it harder for you. And it made it harder for Harold Perkins, especially that's his first game in a situation like that, when you have to play linebacker and play the position. It's one thing if you kind of get him into like let's say a Grambling this week, or an FCS opponent to kind of work him playing linebacker, but out the gate against a top 5 team like Florida State, a team that looks like a college football playoff caliber team on Sunday, it's going to be hard to do. I mean, it's hard to just throw him out there and say, hey, play linebacker for us. So we'll see how LSU adjusts. I mean, I trust Matt House. I mean, everybody was really criticizing Matt House after the first game, but I've seen enough of Matt House and what he was able to do last year that for me, I'm confident that he can turn things around with Harold Perkins, because really a huge reason why LSU was so successful last year was how Matt House was able to use Harold Perkins. So I'm intrigued to see how that dynamic is going to work with a talented defensive player like Harold Perkins moving forward. So keep an eye on that. Next clip we have here is Mason Smith. So a positive for LSU. There hasn't been a lot of positives after the last week. One positive is LSU is going to have Mason Smith back healthy for the first time since last year when he tore his ACL. I know Mason has worked really hard to get his way back into the playing field. The last game was a terrible situation for him to get suspended, for him to miss that game. Feel terrible for Mason Smith about that. So I'm really excited for him to see what he can do playing on the football field. So this was Brian Kelly confirming Mason Smith back playing on the football field this Saturday against Grambling.
Giddy. Is that a good enough word? I'd say gritty, but giddy is the best I could come up with in one word. No, I mean, he obviously impacts our defense. He allows us to do different things, allows us to, he's a guy that can play the 5 technique. He can play the 3. He can play the 1, the 0. I mean, his flexibility on our defense provides a new dimension that we're excited about getting him back.
So that was a short one. Mason Smith, Brian Kelly said he's giddy getting him back. If he has to describe one word about it, that he's excited to get Mason Smith back on the football field. I'm looking forward to see what he does. I was just on the SEC teleconference with Brian Kelly, and he elaborated a little bit more, explained a little bit more on what you should expect with Mason Smith, since this is going to be his first game back from the injury, the torn ACL from last year. So Mason Smith, he's going to be limited in some ways. You're not going to expect him to play the entire game against Grambling. Brian Kelly said that he expects about 30 plays for Mason Smith for this first game, trying to ease his way back from the injury, but having him in the middle of the defense, nothing can be said about that, and what kind of impact he will be to bring this team back. So, and this defense, make this a better defense overall. So appreciate James Taylor for tuning in as well and asking a question. I know Cameron just asked a question earlier about what surprised me most about the game, and basically my answer was, if you can go back and listen to it a little bit earlier, I just said LSU was just, the softer team. I thought that was the most surprising thing of it, about how soft they actually played and how Florida State was just a more physical team. They just bullied LSU, and then how LSU just couldn't really keep up with Florida State as far as an offense is concerned, because I thought that was their biggest strength and how much they've really impressed in practice. And really the receivers, the inconsistent play there, was really surprised by that after just seeing them really dominate in fall practice. So James Taylor says, is there a quarterback controversy? So my thoughts on that is there's no quarterback controversy. The first game of the year, you expect it to be very sloppy. Now you can say, well, Jace, Florida State wasn't very sloppy. I mean, their passing game looked really good with Jordan Travis. Well, if you look in the first half, it was pretty sloppy at some times for Florida State. There were some drop passes underneath, and Jordan Travis almost made a critical mistake and almost threw an interception to LSU earlier in the game as well, from deep back in their own goal line. That could have been a crucial mistake there. Travis also threw an interception to Deuce Chestnut. So as good as Florida State looked, I mean, they were early in the first half, they were kind of feeling their things way as well. And like for LSU, Jaden Daniels is the guy. I mean, Jaden Daniels is the guy for this year. Everybody's has their thoughts about Jaden Daniels. Some guys don't want him. They want Garrett Nussmeier in there. The only thing I would say about Nussmeier being there, maybe you score another touchdown or two, especially like the Brian Thomas deep ball, like with Garrett. If Garrett threw that play or made that throw, yeah, that could have been a touchdown right there. But with a touchdown or two added, it wasn't going to do much on the scoreboard. I feel like what Jaden Daniels does with his running ability and as far as how he manages things, he doesn't turn the football over. He doesn't make a lot of terrible mistakes. He doesn't put you in that position. And we've seen him take over games before. You saw what he's capable of if you watch the Alabama game. And really, a lot of the plays weren't Jaden Daniels' fault. You had a drop pass from Brian Thomas. Now, could have been a better throw? Yeah. But it was still a play. If you're at LSU and you're a wide receiver with all the talent that there is at wide receiver and what LSU is known for wide receivers, you got to make that play. And Brian Thomas just couldn't reel it in at the end of the third quarter. You go and look at the interception. That was not Jaden Daniels' fault either. The receiver slipped, and because you have to be – it's a game about timing as well. So it has to be a better timing on that. And really the receiver just slipped and fell. So you can't really do much about that. That wasn't really on Jaden Daniels. Kyron Lacy, he had a drop in the game on third down. If he catches that, Kirk Herbstreit was going over that as well. There's nobody stopping him. He's scoring a touchdown there. So for me, Jaden Daniels is your guy. Jaden Daniels is going to still have a really good season this year. I'm still very confident in Jaden this year that he's going to be the guy. He's going to have a great season. And really you make your biggest improvement from game 1 to game 2. So he's your guy this year. Everybody knows that Garrett Nussmeier, he is going to be the guy next year. But was it a great game by Jaden Daniels? No, it wasn't a great game. But was it the reason they lost? Did he play terrible? No, he didn't. So he was not the reason that they lost in the slightest. So appreciate that question there. I still don't think that he is. I still think that he is the guy for LSU. Secondary play has to be better. I totally agree with that, James. And then actually, that's a perfect segue into the next clip from Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly talked about the secondary play for LSU. And was it more just technique issues for those guys, or was it just Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson, were they just better? So here's Brian Kelly talking about the DBs and what he thought kind of played a lot of their problems throughout the entire night.
Well, I think there's some technical things that we have to be better at, technique-wise. We're an inside leverage and supposed to be denying the slant, and we're letting a receiver inside us. We're supposed to be denying the post, and we're getting run by. Is that physical ability? Is that lack of technique? Maybe it's both. Look, we knew that there were going to be some matchup issues. I want to go back to where I started. And when I say this game of football is hard, it requires such an attention to detail when it comes to, it's not just about your ability. You have to apply the technique and the traits necessary if you want to succeed in this game. And we just didn't do a good enough job, whether it was at the cornerback position or whether it was at the safety position. If you're supposed to be in a particular position, you need to be there. And that's where a number of things broke down for us, and in particular at corner.
Yeah, I was Brian Kelly there talking about the secondary. So James asked another question about LSU being DBU, the question marks in the secondary. Well, that DBU title was, I guess so far for LSU, that's definitely not the case. I mean, we knew going into the season that it was going to be, as far as question marks, the biggest question marks, it was the secondary. And we knew that the matchup with the receivers wasn't a good matchup because we knew how athletic and how big the receivers were. Now, you can kind of look at technique. You can kind of look at them just being better. There were some instances of that. You look at the touchdowns that Florida State scored, especially the 3 touchdown catches from Coleman. The first one, it was just a slant. right? I mean, if you go up and make the tackle, it's a first down. But LSU misses one tackle, and then another tackle, and then all of a sudden, Keon Coleman's run to the end zone. So that's the first touchdown he scored. The second touchdown, LSU was in decent position, right? I mean, it was in the corner of the end zone, and really Major Burns, who's actually lengthwise is probably the best DB that can match up on any of those receivers, and he was in position. Just Keon Coleman made a play. He just used his basketball background and just went up, made a play. You look at the last touchdown. I just thought that was a great throw by Jordan Travis in the back of the end zone, the only place where Coleman can get it. And look, LSU is not going to play a receiving core like that the whole year. Now, there's going to be some good receiver cores. I mean, Ole Miss got some good receivers. There's going to be some passing games. Mississippi State's going to be a good challenge. Texas A&M is probably the closest when it comes to like just really great receivers. I'll have a mismatch over LSU, but besides that, I think LSU, at least the back end, can hold their own against some of the other teams in the SEC. But as far as a quarterback and wide receiver duo, I don't think LSU is playing a quarterback receiver duo as good as they one that they face in Florida State with those receivers. And a lot of times, coverage-wise, they dropped back, and it was a lot of quick throws from Travis, and Johnny Wilson had plenty of room to run. Coleman had plenty of room to run, so they're giving them that catch as well. Florida State receivers were really good, James. Coach JT, appreciate you tuning in. Yeah, they're really good. Keon Coleman is a Louisiana guy from Opelousas Catholic. I actually covered him a lot in high school. Wrote a lot about him at Opelousas Catholic. Was a two-way star, football, basketball. And then he went to Michigan State, played football and basketball there, and entered himself in the transfer portal. LSU was going after Keon Coleman. He ended up choosing Florida State, and that was obviously a big swing for Florida State to get him, and you saw what kind of difference he made on Sunday night. We have one more quote to go from Brian Kelly, and this was actually a question I asked him. So I talked about the passing game, what his thoughts were on it, just because there were some plays. I mean, Jaden Downs threw for almost 400 yards on Sunday. There are a lot of plays to be made, but at the same time, as y'all can recall, LSU missed on a lot of plays. There were some drop passes, the fourth downs, all that. Just kind of get a sense from Brian Kelly, said what his overall thoughts were on the passing game, and then Brian Kelly, he was very motivated with this answer, saying I could have gone to a lot of different things, not just the passing game, the defense. He really broke it down here. So here's my question to Brian Kelly about what his thought was on the passing game. Then he really dig deeper into that.
Jace, LeJeune from Gridiron football. I know you talked about the passing game with Jaden Daniels. There were some plays that y'all made, obviously, but the drop passes, the inconsistencies there. So just elaborate on just the passing game, what you thought about that overall throughout the entire game.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could go through a number of different situations. We don't get to the chains on third and 5. We're short on the chains. What are you thinking in those situations? What's your thought process? We've got a drop here on 3rd and 6. We're trying to turn upfield. Let's secure the catch. We're 4th and 1, and we're trying to make a play instead of reading what the defender is giving you. I could elaborate further on defense. We're spinning down a safety to sit in the curl. He's watching the quarterback. We could have been more creative with play calling. We could have been better defensively and making some less spy calls and bringing more pressure. I mean, I could attack the whole thing. The bottom line is I've got to get our football team thinking the right way and play with a competitive edge. In football, this game of football, it is hard to win. If you don't play with a competitive edge, if you are not locked in and disciplined and focused, we can have a conversation about all these things all the time. If you have a competitive edge, if you recognize how hard this game is and you're focused, none of the crap that I just mentioned will matter because they'll overcome it.
So Brian Kelly, very heated with that response. Just that's what that old ball coach in him, right? Just talking about it's just this. This could have gone right. He could have ran this a little bit deeper. He could have done that better. The defense could have done this. Could have done that. That's the coach. Especially like you look at Nick Saban. Nick Saban can win a game 100-0. And then he would tell you in the post game, well, we could have won it 200-0, right? That's just how coaches are, right? But especially in a loss like that, you look at those stuff even more. But man, a lot of missed opportunities, and that's what I'm going to go into now. Each week, you're going to see it. I have a post-game recap, and I have my takeaways from the game. Unfortunately for this, you can go to our website, gridironfootballusa.com, to read it. But unfortunately, these 5 takeaways was what went wrong the most for LSU. So if you want to read about that and what I thought were the 5 biggest difference makers about what went wrong for LSU in that game against Florida State, you can go and check that out at gridironfootballusa.com. Actually, that link is in the comments below. I'll put that in there pretty soon. But yeah, appreciate all of y'all that's tuning in right now. Appreciate all the questions from Coach JT and Cameron. If you have any questions, feel free to chat. We'd love to get what your thoughts were on the Florida State game and what y'all think LSU can do moving forward and bounce back from this. So very curious what y'all have to say about this. So feel free to interact with us in the comments section. Please like, share, subscribe to our channel too. As far as the takeaways go, you can go and read that and check that out at gridironfootballusa.com. I'll actually put down the comments in the chat about right now. So you can go and check that out. Look at all the takeaways there of what I thought went wrong with LSU. But with this segment, I'm going to say the good, the bad, and the ugly from this game. And one of the bad and uglies, 2 of the bad and uglies are actually in that article. So the good, man, that was tough to find. That was tough to find in this type of game. But if I have to say if there was good in that game, I would have to say I was pretty impressed with the D-line. That was a big question going into it with Mason Smith being out, how much of a difference it would make. I don't really think Mason Smith being in the lineup would really affect the game that much. But because really the interior of the D-line, Mekhi Wingo is a beast. He got in the backfield plenty of times up the middle, brought some really good pass rush up the middle. Him and Jacoby and Gilroy. I was impressed with Jordan Jefferson coming in there. He made some plays too on the defensive line. And then on the edges, LSU needs to play Braden Swinson more. Braden Swinson got there a couple of times. It's just really tough when you're playing a quarterback like Jordan Travis because he can just move up and extend plays with his legs. It's a tough quarterback to go up against. But I thought when they got there with 4, LSU could get there. It's just that the quarterback made a play and their offensive line held pretty well. But I really like this defensive line. I think that's a positive takeaway to come out with it. Braden Swinson looked really good. The 2 defensive tackles I told you about. And then when you add Mason Smith back in the lineup, I was very encouraged about that. So the defensive line, Jake Bramlett, then we have to go with the punter, right? But, that punt he made, the pin out to Florida State inside the 1-yard line, that was probably the best play LSU had. I know I'm joking a little bit, but at the same time, pretty serious about that as well. That was an excellent play that Jake Bramlett made. Was a key part, a positive part about special teams too. Jay Bramlett was a positive last year for him, but as the punter and having him back for another year, I think he's going to do a good job changing the field. And offensively, if you look at it, LSU moved the ball up and down the field. If you look at the total yards, it was pretty close with LSU and Florida State. With them being able to move the football up and down the field, they did. You saw in that first drive. 2 plays, they're inside the 5-yard line. So it's just about executing in the red zone when it's tough. It's tougher in the red area, but you got to be able to execute, and that kind of leads into the bad. The bad was one of my takeaways in that article I wrote about, and that is LSU in the critical moments. like I said, if you go and look at the stats, I'm going to try to find the final stats on me, but it was pretty close. 460 total yards for LSU, 494 total yards for Florida State. It was pretty close yards-wise. I feel like the biggest stat that made a difference and why Florida State ran away from LSU, and it shows you how important this stat is. Third down efficiency, fourth down efficiency, and red zone efficiency. LSU, if you combine third, fourth downs, LSU was a combined 3 of 13 on third and fourth down. In the red zone, LSU was inside the red zone twice. The first time they had 6 plays to try to get in the end zone. They got help with the unnecessary roughness penalty. That got them a couple more plays. But third down, fourth down, red zone, that was crucial for LSU. They were terrible in that area, not only on offense. I already mentioned 3 of 13. But look at Florida State. Look at how they did in those areas, right? They were 9 of 15 on third, fourth down, and they executed in the red zone. Now, they did have the interception after the Aaron Anderson punt, but they're able to overcome all that. And we talk about the drops, 2 missed opportunities. Kyron Lacey has a drop. If he catches that, Kyron Lacey's probably walking in the end zone, or at least they're putting him in a position inside the 5. Brian Thomas, talk about how much the momentum swung right there. At the end of the third quarter, it was only a touchdown game. It was only 24-17 entering the fourth quarter. The play before that was the deep play that Brian Thomas dropped. If he catches that, LSU scores. If LSU scores there, it's 24-24. At the start of the fourth quarter. Instead, you drop a pass there, and then Jaden Daniels throws an interception the very next play, the first play of the fourth quarter. So, a lot of missed opportunities to go back and look at it. We talked about it at the very beginning of the show in the first quarter. LSU, even let's say it kicked the 2 field goals instead of going for touchdowns there. LSU leads 23-14 at halftime instead of 17-14. So LSU had chances to really separate themselves in the first half, just didn't do it. And I think that's what really led to a lackluster second half of them being outscored 31-0, even though it was 31-7 with the late touchdown pass to Brian Thomas. By that time, it didn't really matter. The game was pretty much over by then. So that was the bad. And then you can probably understand what the ugly was, and that was the secondary. Just too many big plays. Gave up, whether it was just giving passes up underneath. That's the thing. It could have been worse for the passing game towards LSU, because Florida State dropped a couple passes. Johnny Wilson had a couple drops, but Keon Coleman was just too good. And simple as that, no matter who it was, you could have put Chestnut, Zai, Sage, Major. It did not matter. Greg Brooks made a nice play in the first quarter, again a PBU, but on a deep pass attempt. But that was pretty much about it. It reared its ugly head. We knew that was going to be a problem. We didn't know how much of a problem it was going to be with a lot of new looks in the back end, but it was pretty much the worst case scenario for LSU. Giving up 200-yard receivers. I know Jordan Travis, he accounted for 5 touchdowns, 4 through the air, 1 on the ground, threw 3 touchdowns to actually, I think 3 for 5 touchdowns. Yeah, that's right. And he ran for another one. But anyway, threw 3 touchdowns. Keon Coleman had 122 yards receiving, 9 catches, and 3 touchdowns. And then you look at the other side, Johnny Wilson, he had over 100 yards receiving too. There wasn't too much you can really do right there against that passing game of Florida State. So a lot of improvement to be made there in that area. If you look at the red zone, if you look at the drive chart, in the second half, it was, I believe, field goal, touchdown, 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 touchdown in the second half. What pretty much stopped Florida State was the clock ran out. So very disappointed defensively. Had chances to get off the field on third downs, make some plays. Just couldn't get off the field on third downs. So But that's pretty much about it for this game, for the LSU Florida State game. Disappointing loss. LSU drops down to 14th in the AP poll. And then Florida State, they moved up to number 4. So from 8 to 4. Now, I legit think, like, Florida State, they should be in the college football playoff. You saw what happened with Clemson. They lost to Duke on Monday. Really, they got blown out by Duke. It wasn't even really close. North Carolina looked pretty good, though. I mean, North Carolina is going to definitely be in the mix of it. We'll see what Miami does against Texas A&M. And then Duke looks like they're going to be a contender, too, with what they were able to do against Clemson. But I really like Florida State to win that conference and to make the college football playoff. I think just the veteran makeup of that team, the veteran quarterback. Jordan Travis has been there for, 6 years. Seems like he's been there like 10 years already over there. He looks like he's going to be in the mix for the Heisman Trophy. And we got probably the best, you can make the case, best receiving core in the country too with that statement performance. So Florida State, congratulations to Florida State. They outplayed LSU. They dominated LSU. And it was a great win for them. So a big win for Coach Mike Norvell. Definitely his biggest since he's been the coach over there to get a win like that. Now for LSU. To wrap up the show, we're going to talk about, because, LSU and Grambling, no offense to Grambling, but this is going to be LSU's bounce back game against Grambling. And no respect to what Hugh Jackson's doing over there. He's doing a good job building back that brand that Grambling, a proud traditional program. Eddie Robinson, we talk about all the NFL players. In fact, I think Grambling for a long time had the most players in the NFL Hall of Fame from that school for more than any other college. It shows you how much history there is at Grambling. And I'm excited for a lot of the Grambling guys that get a chance to play, go back to Louisiana and showcase what they can do against LSU, against a team that they would like to play for. A bunch of Louisiana guys get the opportunity there. But for LSU, this is really more about LSU. This is a get-back game, a get-right game. This is what it is. It's really about LSU getting right, making sure to play the standard of football that Brian Kelly wants this team to play. So this is a tune-up game. This is really for about LSU and see what they can do, how they can bounce back is going to be the question. I don't think there's going to be any doubt about the end result. I mean, LSU should have a great game, a great outing against Grambling, but we're going to see how motivated LSU looks and how much they really want it. LSU, look at last year. LSU lost to Florida State to start the season, and look how they bounced back. They ended up winning the SEC West. They beat Alabama. So we're going to see what that is. Okay, Brant, appreciate Brant commenting as well. Back to Louisiana, confirming by bias that North Louisiana is southern Arkansas. So, yeah, you got a point there, Brant. Appreciate you chiming in. It's pretty up there, right, with Grambling being up, of course, the top of the state of Louisiana, kind of in that Arkansas-Louisiana border there. So, we'll get to see about that. But it's a really good opportunity for a lot of kids from Grambling to have a chance to play against LSU in Tiger Stadium. So I'm happy for them. I'm glad that they're going to get that opportunity. And it's going to be a great measuring stick, obviously, for them. But you look at last year, it's kind of similar. LSU came off a very disappointing loss, a lot of question marks there against Florida State. They played Southern after that to start the home schedule, and we saw how LSU responded after that, won the SEC West, winning 10 games. So we'll see how this team bounces back. It just feels different because you didn't know what you really had last year in Brian Kelly's first year. After a great season in year one, you thought LSU was going to make the next step, at least early in the year, and it's just not there yet. So we'll see how much improved this LSU football team can go. That's what's the beautiful thing about football. You have another chance the next week to make up for it. So I think LSU, it's Wednesday. LSU's flushing that loss down the drain, and then they're focused on looking ahead to Grambling and looking ahead to the rest of the season. This is a very important game for LSU to get it right. and see what they got personnel-wise. Get a lot of freshmen will get the opportunity to play. A lot of new faces will get the opportunity to play. So we'll see what LSU's got and a lot of the young guys and see where they insert them moving forward. Before we wrap up, if y'all have any last-minute comments or any players that y'all curious about seeing or any guys that y'all curious about in general, feel free to comment in the comment section. But until then, looks like I'm about to wrap up. As far as the final score prediction and all that, you can make sure I'm going to have a game preview for Grambling up on the website tomorrow on Thursday. But you can go back and look at the recent LSU articles I put up, the instant game reaction, and then my 5 takeaways from the game as well. So Brant comments as well. Appreciate Brant for tuning in and putting your insight in as well. Appreciate Brant, JT, and Cameron for giving their insight. So Brant wants to know, or Brant, this is a comment. For this game, I'd like to see us spread and look at short-range passes to the field more. It worked early against FSU, but we focused in on the box and the deep ball as the game went on. Yeah, Jane Daniels seems pretty comfortable throwing that to the far side of the field. Jane has a pretty strong arm, and he feels comfortable with that, like that comeback route, right? Those outs to the left side of the field, to the right side of the field. He's pretty comfortable with throwing those. I think Malik Neighbors had some catches like that. Brian Thomas has some catches like that. It's been really a route that we've seen Jaden really hit on, or I guess like feel the most comfortable throwing since he's been here at LSU. And actually, that was what the play was like that against Florida State in the second half in the fourth quarter. That was the interception. But yeah, he actually looks really comfortable making that throw. I do want to see what LSU can do with the deep ball. Because that was a big question mark, right? A big question mark was see how LSU was going to handle or just improve in that area, because LSU didn't hit on a lot of explosive plays last year in the passing game. So they got the athletes, they got the receivers. It's just trying to build that confidence, and that was something that Jane Daniels was trying to do as the season went on. You saw a little bit of that against Florida about the deep ball. Played a big part in that win for LSU against Florida, and that's when Jane Daniels started becoming more comfortable in the offense and him showing his true ability. And like I said, you make the improvement from week 1 to week 2. LSU had chances for big plays. They're just drops. So we'll see how LSU does in focusing on that and focusing on trying to executing the big plays. Sometimes, like Brian Kelly said, it doesn't have to be guys you have to throw like an 80-yard deep ball for a touchdown. You don't have to be Joe Milton and throw it 80 yards downfield all the time. But what you can do is put these guys in like positions that they can score big plays. It can be a pop pass, and let's see, Aaron Anderson goes 80 yards for a touchdown. It's putting those guys in position to make big plays. Last year, a lot of comeback routes, a lot of athletes coming back to the football. So you're not going to really expect a lot of plays like that when you're coming back to the football. If you lead them and put the ball out in front for them to go and make a play and make a move, let them be an athlete, don't let their momentum go opposite side of the end zone, then that's going to be something we'll see from LSU and how they can do that, how they can lead their receivers into making big plays. So that's what I'm interested in seeing. That's a good point about their brand. I know everybody's anxious about the passing offense, seeing how much of an improvement it makes from last week to this week. Jay Daniels threw for over 300 yards, so close to 400 yards. So the passing game is there. It's just the ability to be more consistent on trying to hit on some of those bigger plays. So we'll see how that improves over the course of the season. Well, appreciate guys once again for hanging out with me. We won't have Marcus here this week. We'll have him back next week, hopefully. Maybe we can break down a little bit more of Grambling. Hopefully we can just move on and flush that one to bed from the LSU and Florida State game, and hopefully they can move on and improve against Grambling moving forward. After that, you got I believe you got Mississippi State. It'll be a road game early in the morning, so that will be the first really big indicator that we'll get from LSU to see how much they've improved from the first game, and in Arkansas, and then moving forward after that. Thank y'all, guys. Thank y'all for liking, sharing. Please share the show, like the show, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll have content for LSU for the rest of the week. We'll check out our website, GridironFootballUSA.com. We'll have a game preview about Grambling State coming tomorrow, and then actually tune in or go to our website after the game on Saturday. We'll have a show there as well. Appreciate y'all guys watching, and then we'll see y'all next week as we'll break down the Grambling game, and we'll look forward to Mississippi State. So this is the Chase with Jace. Hopefully y'all finish y'all like the show, and we'll talk with y'all next week.